Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. I'm Jamie. That's Heath. That's Chris. We're looking at Overreaction Monday. Some players who definitely struggled in Week 15. And we'll find out if you advanced, if you're still going to trust them in Week 16. So let's start with the Cowboys and their passing game. So their team has been playing great. It's funny because it's like, remember how we were with the Chiefs, where it was like the defense was carrying them a little bit and then the offense was struggling? It's kind of how we are, I think, with the Cowboys right now. So it was a bad game against the Giants from an offensive perspective. The run game was back on track. You got certainly good performances from Tony Pollard and from Ezekiel Elliott. But Dak Prescott, 28 of 37 for 217, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Dalton Schultz was fine, 8 catches, 67 yards, and a touchdown. But we're not talking about it. We're talking about CeeDee Lamb, who had 6 catches for 50 yards on 9 targets. Amari Cooper, where have you gone? 2 catches for 8 yards on 5 targets. Michael Gallup, 3 catches for 32 yards on 5 targets. Heath, do we have a Cowboys passing game problem heading into Week 16 as they take on, I believe it's Washington?
I feel like this a lot like it did the Chiefs. Like, yes, there is a problem. There has been a problem. I don't feel comfortable saying there will be a problem, and I'm probably going to start that. I mean, if you survived this game, I'm probably going to go back to Cooper, to Lamb, and to Dak in Week 16.
It's just so frustrating to see how it's been this downward spiral for them. The defense has been amazing. The run game, again, was very strong just in terms of what they did as a team when they rushed 30 times for 125 yards and a touchdown, 4.2 yards per carry. But we'll see. Washington's going to be on a short week, and so hopefully things matter for the Cowboys in that regard. But just very, very frustrating to see how this all unfolded. Let's go to KYLER Murray, who, as we know, the Cardinals were really bad, and I'm sure Cardinals fans are overreacting, but certainly fantasy managers are as well. He's now been back for 3 games, following the ankle injury. 2 of them have been very poor in terms of his overall fantasy production. 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions over that span, Chris. Against the Lions, he was 23 of 41 passing, 257 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. The run game, though, disappeared completely. 4 carries, 3 yards. So if you advanced with KYLER Murray taking on the Colts, how comfortable do you feel about him in Week 16?
Yeah, I mean, the Colts have a really solid defense. They forced a lot of turnovers, so it's not the best matchup in the world. But I don't know. This was such a weird game, right? Like, they fell behind really big early. They were chasing points. They got out of their game plan. You know, KYLER Murray didn't have a great fantasy game in Week 14, but he still passed for 383 yards. You know, the passing game was still working. Nothing really worked for them yesterday, and I don't think that's going to be the case moving forward. I'm actually still very encouraged by the fact that KYLER Murray had, 120 yards in his first 2 games back from the injury. So I think that the rushing potential, along with the fact that this has still been a very efficient passing game for the most part, even if you take out DeAndre Hopkins' numbers, I do think he's still going to be a must-start fantasy quarterback. And, I mean, look, how many quarterbacks would you be willing to trust over him anyway? It's not like, you know, we got a good game from Patrick Mahomes last week, but he's been really bad since Week 7. Dak Prescott's been bad for a while. Like, there aren't that many good fantasy quarterbacks. So, yeah, you might be feeling a little iffy on KYLER Murray this week, but I'm still viewing him as a top 5 fantasy quarterback.
I'm sure most people feel the same way, but this was the first game without DeAndre Hopkins, so you could take that into account as well. So Christian Kirk did some nice things. Obviously, A.J. Green's going to put up numbers. Zach Ertz was fine. This feels like more they just got punched in the mouth and they couldn't recover, and hopefully they do bounce back. And for what it's worth, you did mention the Colts have a really good defense. They did give up almost 300 passing yards to Mac Jones in a comeback effort, and obviously we feel a lot more comfortable about KYLER Murray in that regard. Let's go to the Chiefs, and we'll talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was expected to have a very good game against the Chargers because of how the Chargers' run defense has been for the majority of the season. But they got behind. They had to throw. And we saw the explosion that we've been waiting for from Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill. Do we feel comfortable going back to Clyde Edwards-Helaire heading into Week 16 against the Steelers defense that, for the most part, has been very bad against the run?
Well, you know, I mean, it's a very bad run defense. He'll probably be great, even though the Chargers are a very bad run defense. I don't know what to make of it because that was his 2nd highest snap share of the season since Week 1. He played 71% of the snaps. He saw 4 targets. That's a season high. He just didn't do anything with it. Only had 9 carries because of the game script. I don't really think the Steelers' offense at Arrowhead is going to be very successful. I think the Chiefs should be playing from ahead. I'm probably going to go right back to Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a number 2 running back, but I don't feel as confident in him as I do in the quarterbacks.
It's almost funny, like, you never really think about this. They need Chris Jones back.
Yeah.
They need Snead back. You need everybody back on the defense to make sure things are back for him, that they can have the time of possession, that they can have the ball, that they're not in these frantic comebacks. But most fantasy managers would rather say, nah, we like to see Mahomes and that group get going a little bit more. So we'll see how things come out of this for the defense for Kansas City. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire, very difficult to bench, taking on the Steelers defense. That once again, it wasn't the huge games like we've seen the previous weeks. Dalvin Cook, for example, running through them 2 weeks ago, but still Deontay Foreman had over 100 yards rushing. So this defense, run defense for Pittsburgh, certainly not solved yet by any stretch. Let's go to Baltimore now, where we'll find out if Lamar Jackson does come back. But Devontae Freeman was not great in the loss against the Packers, and really not great from a standpoint of we saw a little too much of Latavius Murray based on where the situation has been for the last several weeks. So, Chris, going into Week 16, taking on the Bengals, how do you feel about Devontae Freeman after seeing what Latavius Murray just did?
I mean, the Bengals are a pretty good defense in their own right as well, as we saw this week. Freeman still got 56% of the snaps in this one. I don't really understand why Latavius Murray had a bigger role in this game. It's not like he had been getting more snaps recently and had been showing sparks. He had 1 touch, 1 carry, 1 yard in the previous game. So I'm not quite sure what went in the decision-making process there. But it's kind of like the Cardinals for me, where this game didn't really go according to the way the Ravens typically want to go. They dropped back to pass over 50 times. Tyler Huntley was obviously a big part of the rushing game, as we saw with the 70-plus yards, but they really had to rely on the pass, and they relied on a lot of short throws. Freeman didn't really get involved in that. I think he could be involved in that more moving forward, but I don't know. If this is going to be a two-way split, I don't think there's any way you could use either one of them, but I'm not quite ready to say that yet. So I think Freeman's still going to be in that low-end RB2 discussion for Week 16. And if you've been watching the show the whole episode, you've heard how many running backs we don't really feel great about right now. So, throw Freeman in that pile.
Yep. Again, we could be looking at Ronald Jones ahead of Devontae Freeman, Samaje Perine ahead of Devontae Freeman. Heath may go with Amir Abdullah ahead of Devontae Freeman. I mean, again, we just don't know. We'll get to our rankings probably. For those of you watching, good program note. Our rankings won't be updated until Wednesday. Typically, we do it on Tuesday, but with the Tuesday games, you won't see our rankings until Wednesday for those of you checking. Let's go now to the Panthers and another guy that I think a lot of people are concerned about, and that is DJ Moore. So Matt Rule is saying that he's going to evaluate Cam Newton. He's going to see where the health is at for Sam Darnold, so that could change some things. But another down game for DJ Moore, who had 6 catches for 48 yards on 11 targets. The targets are nice. The production, however, lately has not been nice.
No, it's not been nice. I mean, he did get a 2-point conversion, so he still got you 12 fantasy points. He didn't hurt you, I guess, actively this week. I'm probably just going. I mean, we keep saying this about all these guys that are bad. And we're probably just going to go back to them, because what are you going to do? Are you going to, during your fantasy semifinals, bench the players that you've played all year and play the guys who were good in Week 15? I think we've seen enough from this season to know what happened last week is not very predictive for what's going to happen next week. I'll stick by DJ Moore.
It's a tough matchup, though. This Bucs secondary has definitely played much better than it has been earlier in the season. We'll find out the quarterback. We'll give you that answer as the week unfolds, if it's going to be Cam Newton or Sam Darnold. One of the worst stat lines of the week was from the Bengals and Jamar Chase. 1 catch, 3 yards, 4 targets. They did a very good job of taking him out of the game. And so last week, Chris, against San Francisco, which is a very beat-up secondary, Jamar Chase went nuts. But this is really the first break. That was really the first breakout game for him in about a month. And so now we come off this game now, heading into your championship. If you had a bye and you watch Jamar Chase do that, how are you going to feel about him taking on a Ravens, which has a very beat-up secondary as well?
I'm really heavily invested in the Bengals offense. I've got Mixon, Chase, Higgins in a lot of leagues. It's been really frustrating since the start of Sunday. Look, Chase, they only threw the ball 22 times in this one. The Broncos offense couldn't get anything going. So I don't know how much you can take away from that, except from the fact that the Bengals are perfectly happy to sit on the ball, run the clock, and, play a slow, low-scoring game. They're perfectly happy to do that. They've done that on several occasions this year. And that's led to some games for Joe Burrow in the 20s in pass attempts. That does make things difficult for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, especially if Tyler Boyd is going to take advantage of a good matchup in the slot like he did yesterday. I don't think that's going to be the case moving forward. Jamar Chase, as he showed in Week 14 with the 2 touchdowns, there's gigantic upside here. The game before that, remember, he had a would-be 88-yard touchdown that he just dropped and turned into an interception. So that going to be someone that I have to start. He's a really risky option, but I think he's probably ranked in the top 15 or so in my rankings for Week 16.
It's such a fascinating matchup because, again, we'll find out who's healthy for the Ravens in their secondary in Week 16, but they made such a concerted effort to take Devontae Adams out of the game, lining up 2 guys on him in the matchup against the Packers this week. They held Adams to 6 catches for 44 yards and a touchdown on 7 targets. But the last time that these two teams met in terms of the Bengals and the Ravens, 10 targets, 8 catches, 201 yards, and a touchdown for Jamar Chase. Put that film back up. Show him what he's capable of doing. Let him do that again. Fantasy managers will definitely be happy. So go right back to Jamar Chase next week against Baltimore. Chris, great job. Thanks for being with us here, as always, on Fantasy Football Today.